Little black boy gave a silent signal to the police dog. What the dog discovered next shocked everyone. Sergeant Rex stopped in the middle of the central station as if he had seen a ghost. His ears perked up, focusing on something no human could perceive. Across the crowded platform, a little black boy of only 8 years old was discreetly tapping 5 times on the back of an elegant white woman who was holding his hand too tightly. The boy repeated the pattern. 5 taps, pause, 5 taps. His desperate eyes met Rex for a second, before quickly looking away. As if he had been trained not to draw attention to himself, Tommy Wilson never imagined that his 8 years of age would be marked by so much fear. 3 weeks ago, he was playing in his grandmother's backyard when everything changed forever. Now disguised in expensive clothes and a different haircut, he was forced to pretend to be the son of people who treated him like property. "Keep your head down and don't look at anyone," the woman whispered, squeezing his fingers until it hurt. "Remember what happens if you try anything." Detective James Morrison, Rex's partner for 7 years, followed the German Shepherd's insistent gaze. "What is it, boy? Are you seeing something I'm not?" Rex was never wrong. In years of working together, his suspicions had always been confirmed. But this time was different. There was no smell of drugs, explosives, or anything else that would justify such extreme agitation. It was something more subtle, more human. Morrison watched the elegant family heading for the 3:30 p.m. train to Seattle. The woman wore designer clothes. The man spoke on his cell phone in an executive tone, and the 3 children looked perfectly well-dressed and well-behaved. A typical American family returning from vacation, except for Tommy's eyes. Those eyes carried a terror that no 8-year-old should know. "Come on, Rex. We can't approach people just because you're having a strange day," Morrison muttered, tugging on the leash. But Rex refused to move. For the first time in 7 years, the dog completely disobeyed a direct order. His paws seemed glued to the ground as he watched Tommy disappear into the crowd, still tapping that silent code on the woman's back. Morrison frowned. Rex never acted like this without reason. What if that little boy was really trying to ask for help in a way that only a trained dog could detect? What Morrison didn't know was that Tommy had learned that specific signal. 5 repeated taps. By watching a documentary about police dogs at his grandmother's house weeks before his life turned into a nightmare. It was his last hope of being found before it was too late. If you're wondering how an 8-year-old boy had the intelligence to use a code that only police dogs recognize, get ready to discover that sometimes survival awakens a wisdom that even adults cannot understand. Subscribe to the channel because this story of courage and instinct will show you that heroes come in all sizes and sometimes walk on 4 legs. The woman noticed Rex's persistent gaze and squeezed Tommy's hand even tighter. "Stop being so dramatic," she whispered venomously. "No one is going to save you here, Margaret Whitefield, 45. An expert in facilitated international adoptions, an elegant euphemism for luxury human trafficking, had perfected her act as a loving mother over 15 years in the business. Her husband, Richard, an executive at a pharmaceutical company, provided the perfect cover. A well-educated white couple with the resources to give opportunities to needy children. "Daddy is expecting you to behave like an obedient son," Richard whispered in Tommy's ear, his words laden with veiled threats. "Remember what happened to the last boy who tried to run away?" Tommy swallowed hard. 3 weeks ago, he was playing in his grandmother's backyard when 2 men showed up pretending to be social workers. "Your mother had an accident. You need to come with us immediately," they said. His grandmother was out shopping and Tommy, frightened, followed without question. Since then, he had been living a carefully orchestrated nightmare. During the day, he was forced to practice being their son, calling them mom and dad, smiling for photos, memorizing answers about his new privileged life. At night, locked in expensive hotel rooms, he listened to phone conversations about scheduled delivery and satisfied end customer. Morrison watched the family head for the train, but something about the man's behavior bothered him. Richard constantly checked his cell phone. His eyes scanned the crowd with barely concealed paranoia, and the way he held the older child's shoulder seemed more like coercion than paternal affection. "Rex, stay," Morrison ordered. Releasing the leash, "Let's investigate discreetly." The German Shepherd moved like a shadow through the crowd, keeping a safe distance, but never losing sight of Tommy. His protective instincts were on high alert. That little boy didn't smell like family, didn't move like a comfortable child, didn't react like a beloved son. Margaret noticed the dog approaching and whispered something urgent to Richard. He immediately called someone. "Change of plans? There's a German Shepherd following us. Activate Protocol B." Tommy overheard the conversation and felt his stomach sink. Protocol B meant medication. It meant sleeping for hours and waking up in a different place, confused and disoriented. It meant that his chances of being found were drastically reduced, but Morrison was closer than they realized. with 15 years of experience in kidnapping cases. He had learned to read subtle signs. The body language of that family screamed falsehood. Too much control, too little natural affection, too much tension for people supposedly on a leisure trip. He discreetly activated his radio. Dispatch. I need to check the documentation of a suspicious family. Train 247, Platform 12, possible child in danger situation. Negative, Morrison. No warrant, no probable cause. We can't approach people based on a hunch. Tommy looked over his shoulder once more, his eyes meeting Rex for 2 precious seconds. This time he did something risky. He discreetly pointed to Richard's backpack while tapping the code 5 times on his own leg. Rex barked once, loud enough to attract attention. Morrison noticed the exchange of glances and something clicked. This kid wasn't just scared. He was trying to communicate specific information. What if Rex wasn't detecting drugs or explosives, but the scent of multiple children in those people's luggage? Margaret turned furiously to Tommy. Last warning, she hissed, squeezing his wrist until it left a mark. The next time you draw attention to yourself, you'll get to know the basement where the children who don't know how to obey are kept. What Margaret didn't know was that Tommy had spent 3 weeks watching, listening and memorizing every detail of her operation. At 8 years old, he already knew names, places, phone numbers, and codes that could dismantle the entire network. And Morrison, who had been following Rex for 7 years, was beginning to understand that his partner wasn't just detecting danger. He was detecting an extraordinarily intelligent boy trying to orchestrate his own rescue in a way no adult would ever imagine possible. As the train approached the platform, Tommy took a deep breath and made the most courageous decision of his life. If that dog was trying to help him, he would give Rex all the information he needed to save him. No matter the risk, inside the train, Tommy was pushed into a window seat with Margaret blocking any possibility of escape. Richard sat across from him, pretending to read a newspaper while keeping an eye on the aisle. The other 2 children, Lisa, 10, and Marcus, 12, remained completely silent, their blank stares trained on not drawing attention. Remember the rules, Margaret whispered, checking to make sure no one was listening. We're a happy family returning from a vacation at Disneyland. Dad works in technology, Mom is a teacher, and you are our blessed adopted children. Tommy nodded, but his mind was working at full speed. During 3 weeks of captivity, he had memorized every detail of the operation. Margaret coordinated 6 different families in 5 states. Richard managed the logistics and false documentation. The real boss, known only as Doctor, never appeared in person as the train picked up speed. Tommy watched Margaret type a message. Package 3 delivered as scheduled. Client awaiting Seattle. Transfer confirmed to Cayman account number 4472, $45,000. That was how much he was worth on the black market for forced adoptions, in the next car. Detective Morrison discreetly showed Tommy's photo to the train inspector. Have you seen this little boy around? Possible kidnapping case. Conductor Helen Rodriguez, 38, mother of 2, studied the image carefully. Yes. I saw him with an elegant family in car 7. But the woman had adoption papers. She called him her son. Documents can be forged, Morrison muttered. My partner Rex detected something. That dog never makes mistakes, Helen frowned, remembering something strange. Now that you mention it, the boy seemed tense. And the woman was holding him very tightly, as if she was afraid he would run away. Morrison felt his police instincts kick in. Can I take a discreet look? Meanwhile, Tommy was executing the riskiest phase of his improvised plan. 3 weeks of observing professional criminals had taught him that documentation was everything in that business. And he had noticed something that Margaret didn't know he knew. During a bathroom break, he had seen Richard stow a folder inside a specific backpack. A folder that contained not only his fake documents, but those of at least a dozen other missing children. Tommy pretended to feel nauseous. I need to go to the bathroom, he said in a weak voice. Lisa will go with you, Margaret ordered. And remember, 5 minutes maximum, Lisa, traumatized by months of captivity, obediently followed Tommy. But in the hallway, he whispered something that made her stop. Do you want to see your family again? The girl's eyes filled with tears. They said my parents don't want me anymore. That's a lie, Tommy replied with adult conviction. My grandmother taught me that real families never give up, but I need your help to save us. Helen Rodriguez discreetly accompanied Morrison to car 7, where Rex waited with growing agitation. The dog had smelled Tommy passing by in the hallway and was now gently scratching at the door. It's that family over there, Helen pointed to Margaret and Richard. Morrison observed the scene. A well-dressed couple, seemingly normal behavior, but something in their body language screamed falsehood. The woman constantly checked her cell phone. The man clutched a backpack as if it contained gold, and the children looked like programmed robots. Helen, I need you to do me a favor, Morrison whispered. Go up to them, make up some excuse to check their tickets. I want to see how they react to authority. When Helen approached the family, Margaret immediately tensed up. Is there a problem, miss? Routine check, Helen smiled. Could you show me your tickets and the children's documentation? Richard almost dropped his newspaper. The children are in the bathroom, but we have everything here. He opened his wallet with movements too nervous for someone innocent. That's when Tommy reappeared in the aisle, followed by Lisa. But this time, instead of the 5-tap code, he did something much riskier. As he passed Helen, he discreetly dropped a small folded piece of paper at her feet. Margaret didn't notice. Richard was too busy looking for documents. But Helen, trained to observe details on trips, noticed it immediately. The paper contained a message written in desperate childish handwriting. We are not their children. Help, there are 12 of us. Black backpack has proof. Helen felt her blood run cold. She discreetly warned Morrison with a glance. Tommy returned to his seat, his heart pounding. He had bet everything on that moment. But watching Richard nervously handling the backpack that contained evidence of dozens of crimes, he knew he had made the right decision. Margaret relaxed when Helen walked away, seemingly satisfied. See? No one suspects anything when you act like a normal family, she said with poisonous arrogance. What she didn't know was that Tommy had spent 3 weeks not just surviving, but studying every aspect of the criminal operation. He knew names, account numbers, trafficking routes, and most importantly, the exact location where other children were being held. Morrison returned to his car and turned on the radio with controlled urgency. Dispatch, I have confirmation of a kidnapping in progress. Train 247, car 7, request immediate interception at the next station. Negative, Morrison. Need more evidence for legal action? Then he'll get evidence, he muttered, looking at Rex. His 4-legged partner had detected more than danger. He had detected an extraordinary boy orchestrating his own release from within the web of an international criminal organization. Tommy took a deep breath, watching the landscape pass by the window. At the next station in Portland, they would have only a 7-minute stop. 7 minutes to execute the final phase of a plan that an 8-year-old had developed by studying professional criminals. Margaret checked her cell phone once more, smiling with cruel satisfaction. 2 hours to Seattle. Soon you'll be with your new family, Tommy. A family that will teach you to be more obedient. For a moment, when she spoke of new family in that threatening tone, everyone around thought they saw fear in Tommy's eyes. But anyone watching closely would have noticed that it wasn't fear shining there. It was the unwavering determination of someone who had turned 3 weeks of horror into a masterclass on how criminals think, and was now about to use that knowledge to destroy their entire operation. The Portland station appeared through the window like a golden opportunity. 7 minutes of scheduled stop. Tommy took a deep breath. It was now or never. I need to pee urgently, he said in a distressed voice, holding his stomach theatrically. Margaret rolled her eyes. Lisa, go with him, and you too. Don't take a second longer than necessary. But Tommy had calculated every move. In the hallway, he whispered to Lisa, when we get to the bathroom, you scream really loud. Scream that we're not their kids. They'll hurt me. The girl trembled. Not if we're surrounded by people, trust me. Meanwhile, Detective Morrison had convinced Helen Rodriguez to do a second check. I want to see their reaction when you ask for specific documents for the children. Criminals always get nervous about details. Helen approached the couple again. Sorry to bother you, but I need to check the children's birth certificates. Standard procedure for minors traveling interstate. Richard's blood ran cold. The documents are in our carry-on luggage. I can get them when the children return. No problem, I can wait. Helen smiled, deliberately sitting down in the seat next to them. Margaret frantically typed a message. Problem. Tax inspector asking for specific documents. Abort mission? The reply came immediately. Impossible, client has already paid, resolve discreetly. It was then that Lisa's scream echoed throughout the entire car. We are not their children. They kidnapped us. Help! The entire car came to a halt. Conversations ceased instantly. All eyes turned to the aisle where Tommy appeared running, shouting, "She's telling the truth. We are kidnapped children." Margaret stood up like lightning, trying to maintain her composure. Our children are having an episode. Psychological problem. You know how it is. But Tommy had prepared for this moment. If we are your children, what is my full name? When is my birthday? Where was I born? Margaret opened and closed her mouth like a fish out of water. Richard was sweating cold sweat, clutching his backpack desperately. Tommy Andrew Wilson, the boy shouted to the entire car. I was born on June 15th in Detroit. My grandmother's name is Betty Wilson, and she lives at 247 Oak Street. My father's name is Jerome Wilson, and he's in the Army. Helen Rodriguez felt every word like a punch in the stomach. Sir, she said to Richard in a voice as cold as ice. Open that backpack now, you have no authority to, Richard began. Morrison appeared in the car, accompanied by Rex, who immediately rushed toward Tommy, barking with relief at finding the boy safe and sound. "Detective Morrison, Police Department. And I have all the authority I need," he announced, showing his badge. "Open the backpack or I'll open it myself." Margaret tried one last desperate gambit. "Officers, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. These children have been traumatized by lie." Tommy interrupted with the force of someone 3 times his age. "Do you want me to tell everyone here the names of the other 9 children they have hidden in Seattle? Do you want me to talk about the $45,000 they received from me?" The silence in the car was deafening. Passengers recorded everything on their cell phones. An elderly lady held her hand over her mouth in horror. Morrison forced open Richard's backpack. What he found made his stomach churn. Dozens of fake documents, photos of children, altered passports, and a notebook with the names, ages, and market values of kidnapped minors. "Margaret Whitefield and Richard Sullivan," Morrison read from one of the documents. "You are under arrest for human trafficking." "Kidnapping, document forgery, and wait!" Margaret shouted, realizing she had completely lost control of the situation. "You don't understand. We save these children from miserable lives. We give them opportunities." Tommy looked directly at her with a maturity that made the entire car shudder. $45,000 isn't saving, ma'am, it's selling." Rex positioned himself between the children and the criminals, growling low, the sound of justice finding its target. Helen Rodriguez radioed the conductor, "Stop the train immediately. Emergency situation, criminals on board." As the train slowed down, Morrison handcuffed Margaret and Richard. "You have the right to remain silent." "He's just a child," Richard exploded, pointing at Tommy in despair. "How did an 8-year-old child defeat us?" Tommy smiled for the first time in 3 weeks. A smile that carried wisdom beyond his years, my grandmother always said. "When you're the weakest in the room, be the smartest. You thought I was just merchandise, but I've been studying you since day one." The boy pulled a small tape recorder from his pocket, an old model his grandmother had given him as a gift. 3 weeks of recording conversations, names, phone numbers, addresses. "It's all here," Margaret fainted. Lisa and Marcus hugged Tommy, crying with relief. Passengers applauded spontaneously. A woman offered chocolate. A man was already calling the numbers Tommy recited from memory, alerting authorities about other children in danger. When the train came to a complete stop, a police operation was already waiting on the platform. FBI, local police, social workers. Tommy had provided enough information to dismantle the entire network in real time. Morrison knelt down to the boy's height. "How did you know Rex would understand you?" "My grandmother showed me a documentary about police dogs. They sense when children are in danger, even when they can't explain it to humans," Tommy replied, petting Rex affectionately. "I just had to give him signals he would recognize." Helen Rodriguez wiped away a tear. "In 20 years of working on trains, I've never seen such courage." As Margaret and Richard were taken away in separate police cars, Margaret shouted one last time, "This won't stop our operation. We're just a small part of it." Tommy looked at her through the window, his eyes carrying a determination that made the criminal realize her fatal mistake. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "I memorized everything. Names, places, bank accounts, routes. When I'm done talking to the FBI, your operation will be history," Rex barked once, a sound of victory that echoed through the station. For a moment, as everyone watched that 8-year-old boy being hugged by police officers and social workers, the question hanging in the air was simple. How did a child manage to defeat an international criminal organization using only intelligence, courage, and the complicity of a dog who believed in him when no adult would? The answer was in Tommy's eyes, eyes that had turned 3 weeks of nightmare into the biggest victory against child trafficking that region had ever seen. 6 months later, Tommy Wilson sat in the front row of the federal courtroom, watching Margaret Whitefield and Richard Sullivan receive their sentences. 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. The 8-year-old boy they had completely underestimated had become the key witness who destroyed an international human trafficking ring. Tommy Wilson's testimony, declared Federal Judge Henderson, was the most extraordinary this court has ever witnessed. An 8-year-old child demonstrated more courage and investigative intelligence than many experienced detectives. Margaret looked at Tommy one last time before being led away in handcuffs. Her eyes, once filled with cruel arrogance, now showed only the emptiness of someone who had lost absolutely everything. Richard couldn't even lift his head. The successful executive had become a broken shell of a man, destroyed by the intelligence of a child he had considered nothing more than merchandise. In the gallery, Detective Morrison and Rex watched with quiet pride. "You know what's most impressive?" Morrison whispered to Helen Rodriguez, who had traveled especially to witness the outcome. "It wasn't luck. Tommy planned every move from the first day of his captivity. The investigation triggered by Tommy's information had resulted in the arrest of 43 criminals in 7 different states. 86 children were rescued from situations of trafficking. Forced adoption and slave labor, the real head of the operation, was identified as Dr. Harrison Blackwood, a respected Boston pediatrician who used his position to select premium merchandise in public hospitals. Tommy had memorized not only names and addresses, but bank codes, transportation routes, and even computer passwords he had overheard during phone conversations. His 8-year-old mind had become a living database that completely dismantled an organization that had been operating for over a decade. "How did you manage to remember everything?" asked FBI Special Agent Amanda Cross during one of the last interviews. "My grandmother always said that when you don't have the power to fight hard, you fight with your head," Tommy replied with the wisdom of someone 3 times his age. "They thought I was just a scared kid, but I was studying them as they studied us." Operation Tommy, as it was officially named, became a case study in police academies across the country. An 8-year-old black boy, using only intelligence and courage, had achieved what entire task forces had failed to do for years. Betty Wilson, Tommy's grandmother, cried as she hugged her grandson in court. "I always knew you were special, boy, but I never imagined you would save so many children." Jerome Wilson, Tommy's father, had obtained emergency leave from the army to be present at the sentencing. "Son," he said with a trembling voice, "you have done more for others in 3 weeks than many do in a lifetime." Lisa and Marcus, the other children rescued from the train, were recovering with their real families. Lisa had started therapy and was slowly regaining her lost confidence. Marcus, traumatized by his longer captivity, still faced difficulties. But he had renewed hope after seeing that even in impossible situations, intelligence could overcome evil. Detective Morrison was promoted to lieutenant and became a national expert on child trafficking cases. Rex received a Medal of Honor and retired as the most decorated police dog in the department's history. But for both of them, the greatest reward was knowing that they had trusted their instincts when everyone around them had doubted them. Helen Rodriguez left her job on the trains and became the coordinator of an NGO specializing in identifying signs of human trafficking on public transportation. "Tommy taught me that heroes come in all sizes," she said in a lecture to station employees. "Sometimes we just need to stop and really look at the children around us." Margaret Whitefield in federal prison discovered that her arrogance had been her complete downfall. Other inmates learned of her crimes against children, and her life became a daily hell. Richard Sullivan had a complete nervous breakdown and was transferred to the psychiatric ward, unable to accept that he had been defeated by just a child. Dr. Blackwood, exposed thanks to Tommy's information, lost his medical license, his personal fortune, and was sentenced to life in prison. "How did an 8-year-old child manage to destroy us?" he repeated obsessively to anyone who would listen. Tommy returned to school like any normal boy, but he carried with him the certainty that he had changed the world. His grades improved, he made new friends, and he discovered a passion for investigation that would lead him to consider a career in law enforcement in the future. In an interview on national television, Tommy was asked what he had learned from the whole experience. "I learned that bad adults always underestimate children," he replied with a calm smile. "They think that because we're small, we're dumb. But my grandmother taught me that size has nothing to do with intelligence." The host asked what he would say to other children in dangerous situations. "Never give up. Always pay attention to everything around you. And if you see a police dog, remember that they are trained to protect children. They will understand if you ask for help in the right way." Rex, who was in the studio, barked once when Tommy finished speaking, as if approving every word. Tommy Wilson's story proved that heroism does not depend on age, size, or physical strength. It depends on courage, intelligence, and the refusal to accept injustice as inevitable. Margaret Whitefield tried to break a child's spirit, but ended up being destroyed by the unwavering determination she underestimated. At the age of 8, Tommy taught the world that sometimes the smallest warriors fight the biggest battles, and when they fight with their hearts and minds united, they can defeat giants who consider themselves invincible. If this story touched your heart and showed you that true courage has no age, subscribe to the channel